Hi everyone, my name is Vince Gauman. Thank you so much for visiting my YouTube channel. Piggybacking a little bit off of the last video I made about uncertainty and increasing amounts of contradictory information coming out, I wanted to speak about the wisdom of complexity and powerlessness. In our society, we tend to think of powerlessness as a bad thing, but powerlessness is actually the place that we can truly surrender into our hearts, surrender into our soul, where we stop fighting, we stop grasping, we stop clutching on to what we believe to be true. So powerlessness is that place where we give up, we surrender, we say, I don't know, help me. And for many of you who have gone through difficult times, you may have experienced that it was in your darkest moment of powerlessness that you suddenly opened up to your power, you suddenly opened up to something new, something bright, a bright light, a helping hand, a new level of knowing that was coming from a different place in your soul. Traditional initiation practices or rites of passage practices in indigenous societies that initiate young people from boys and girls to men and women, usually around the age of 13, and they're taken into the bush, they're taken out of their village, their community for an extended period of time, sometimes 6 weeks. Those initiations, those rites of passage serve a purpose, and that is to bring people into a place where they experience powerlessness and where they really have to go into, like I said, a deep place of uncertainty, where their will is weakened to a degree, you could say. And when the will is weakened enough, they can open up to larger will, to higher will. And so that is the wisdom of powerlessness. Rumi said, the poet Rumi said, when life brings you to your knees, you're in the perfect position to pray. So there is this real power within powerlessness, and we don't talk about that in the Western world. Now, when there is growing amounts of complexity and growing amounts of confusion, what it does is that, well, first of all, people tend to default to trying to solve those complex situations using their binary, polarizing, partisan, political mind. They want to default to old intellectual, conceptual ways of approaching things that really only perpetuate polarization. The mind, the egoic mind, is by nature polarizing. And so if you are trying to address a polarizing situation using a polarizing us versus them consciousness, well, you're just going to perpetuate more of it. And if you do come up with a solution, it's going to be a band-aid solution, and the band-aid is eventually going to fall off. And it's ultimately why politics and political interventions fail. It's why the Middle East continues on with its conflict. And so whether we look at gender identity issues in the school system, or the immigration issues at the border, the US-Mexican border, or in other parts of the world, or any other areas of conflict, we will not solve it with the egoic mind, again, which is by nature polarizing. We just won't. And what's going to happen is that there's going to be an intensification of the complexity. There's going to be an intensification of the, there's going to be more and more exasperation, more frustration. And what that does, as it moves more and more to a boiling point, is that it brings people to their knees. It makes people feel powerless. It makes them come to a place where they basically have to surrender the egoic mind, where they have to come to a place where they say, I don't know, I can't figure this out. And in that window, which actually may only be a fleeting second, a fleeting moment, they may suddenly open to something that they could not hear because they were too caught up in the polarizing consciousness. They may find wisdom in their heart. So, we have to remember, we are not here on this planet to stay asleep in Maya, in illusion. We're not here to stay asleep in the matrix. We are here to wake up from it. And God consciousness, higher consciousness, doesn't have the moral judgments we do. It doesn't take sides. It doesn't say, oh, you're good and you're bad. You're right and you're wrong. Again, Rumi said, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there's a field, I'll meet you there. And that's that non-dual place. And so ultimately, all this chaos and confusion and complexity, what it's doing is it's bringing us there. It's funneling us to that non-dual place, which exists in the heart. That's where we go. Bowing, when you bow down, that's an act of surrendering the dualistic egoic mind to the non-dual nature of the heart. So that is the wisdom of complexity. The temptation is to fix and solve. The temptation is to fix and solve. But that's just going to keep you in the spell of separation. That's just going to keep you locked in your mind. It's going to make you more and more identified with the ego. So, heartbreak serves a purpose. So when we reach that bottoming out place of powerlessness, we enter into heartbreak. And it's in the heartbreak that we break open to the wisdom of the heart. It's in our grief. It's when we break down in tears and we say, I can't do this. I know from my own personal experience of bottoming out and completely surrendering and letting go, that is when I've received the guidance I need from Spirit. That's when the miraculous solutions have come, the guidance has come. So heartbreak, we look at heartbreak as a bad thing in our society, and that's probably because it's related to feeling and emotion, and we, in this very disembodied, cerebral, logical culture here in the West, we don't like to feel. We don't like to dip into our emotions. We like to stay in the mind, in the thinking mind. And an example of that is people would rather understand why something happened, than feel the heartbreak of it happening. For instance, someone might say, I just want to understand why he left me. I just want to understand why this happened. Why I lost my job, why they turned their back on me. I just want to understand. And in this compulsive need to understand, and it's natural to understand, I get that, but it's also an act of bypassing the heartbreak. It's also the way we bypass the heartbreak of what occurred. And it's in the heartbreak that we find our deeper why, and a deeper why that cannot be found at the level of conceptual understanding. And in truth, it is going to be a why that has much more depth. And in many cases, what happens is when we sink into that heartbreak, we may not even need to know why after. It just may be that cleansing. So we want to avoid that. We want to avoid the heartbreak because we're addicted to needing to know why. We're addicted to understanding, and again, we're addicted to solving. We want to solve, we want to fix from that polarizing, ego, partisan, political mind. And so powerlessness, complexity, what it does, it serves the purpose of bringing us into our heart, and often into heartbreak. And in the brokenheartedness, there's an opening where we feel a wisdom not found here. In fact, wisdom is not found in the head, it's in the heart. And that's where we need to go. So all of this is just reaching a boiling point. We're going to reach more and more of a boiling point because we have to enter heartbreak. We have to learn to feel. If we don't know how to feel, if we're scared of feeling, what we're going to do is we're going to default to that polarizing mind. That's going to be our way to, that's going to be our place where we hide out, up there in the attic, right? That's where we're going to hide. That's where we're going to do our spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing means avoiding the body, essentially. That's where we go to hide. And because we are chronically, look at our politicians, just the politicians alone, chronically afraid to feel, chronically disembodied. There's absolutely no way there's going to be a solution that's actually going to be of any use. It's going to perpetuate us versus them consciousness because you're working with a dualistic mind. We have to surrender into not knowing. We have to surrender into the heartbreak of I don't know. And what I mean by that is we have to accept we're not going to figure it out there. So when we travel from here to the heartbreak, we move from conceptual knowing and to increasingly accepting, surrendering, to reaching a powerless place of I simply don't know, I don't understand, help me. And that's where the angels swoop in. That's where the angels come in. That's where the guides come in. That's where the ascended masters come in. Because finally we give up control. We surrender our control. We surrender needing to figure it out and offer all of these very superficial band-aid solutions, which really are, at the end of the day, quite useless. So this is the invitation of these times. This is what they're inviting us towards. So, I offer that to you as to look carefully at where you are getting caught up in the polarizing situations that you're seeing play out in the world. And maybe you're getting caught up too much in your mind, and where you could drop into your heart a bit more. And maybe in your own personal life, accept that maybe you just simply don't know. And what if you just sat there for a while? What an amazing practice just to sit with I don't know. Often when I meditate, I repeat, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. And sit with that. And maybe if you sit there long enough, you might start to weep. You might start to cry. Your heart might break open because you finally surrender to the fact that you can't figure this out. And it's not only that you can't, you're not meant to figure it out. It's not for you to figure out. It's for you to allow the solution to come to you and through you from higher planes of knowing. And it's only by allowing those higher planes of knowing, those higher planes of consciousness, by allowing that into our world through each of us, through the portal of our hearts, that we can come up with the very creative solutions that we need to this long-standing pattern of insanity and suffering on our planet. So thank you so much. I hope I've helped you. I will leave an article in the description for you to read that'll be of support. If you enjoyed this, please, I encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, click notifications, and thanks so much for listening and watching.